who should actually own transportation systems in the future? I think it obviously begs the question, do we continue to have federal, national government pay for everything? And we've seen that that's actually not sustainable. So first of all, we're going to start out with who owns infrastructure today and why that actually matters. First and foremost, most transportation systems are publicly owned, whether that's roads or transit, bus rapid transit, and so forth. Funding, very logically, actually comes from taxpayers, from you and I. Sometimes it comes from bond measures, but it's also federal and state allocations. And without elaborating too much now, we know that that is simply not keeping up with the needs. Ownership really shapes priorities, and whether that's equitably, efficiently, and profitability, well distributed, certainly at the national level, but then within states and local entities. And again, this is not exclusive to a U.S. conversation. And then actually, how do we deal with legacy systems that were built for a different period of time? We often talk about future planning, adding more roads, building more bridges, adding more lanes is not meeting the needs. So how do we move away from building for cars and actually start to build for people and efficient mobility in their choices? So decision making is often really, really slow and political and fragmented, and that kind of shorter-term cycle where actually a future of mobility and planning is really needs to take longer. So let's start with the reality. Today, most transportation infrastructure are publicly owned roads, highways, transit systems. They're funded by taxpayers and managed by government agencies. We won't comment on how well that is done at a global level. We can certainly pick fantastic local work and some great places where the transportation agencies are utterly fantastic. And that really all that matters is what we think. Ownership defines priorities. Public systems tend to focus on access and equity, but they also move incredibly slowly. Decisions are layered, whether it's national, regional, state, and local. Right there is enough to complicate everything. Funding cycles, competing interest, and of course the regular political cycle. And then the challenge is that these systems were designed decades ago, and many people sitting in positions of planning, positions of authority, government, elected officials, and so forth, are actually still trying to bring forward historical planning practices rather than really be inventive, innovative in what the future of design is. So again, that was a time when cars were first in the world, and now it's not the dynamic on-demand mobility ecosystems that really we're all seeking today. We hear now a lot more about public-private partnerships or hybrid models. And it's not complicated language. It invites what you would believe is some combination between the private sector and the public sector working together, or some mechanism of that. Public is actually its stability, its access, its accountability to some degree, but we know it's slower. Now, private sector is speed, innovation, capital, and then really profit-driven. And so that by itself will invite a nice balancing act between public slowness and private acceleration, pardon the pun. A hybrid model is actually trying to work between those, and I'll highlight a couple of examples here in a moment. And then examples are toll roads, mobility platforms, transportation hubs, or multimodal hubs or ecosystems. And then transit partnerships, and there's a whole layer around that. And then there's always this tension between who controls pricing, what access looks like, and then the data that's actually going to not only support it, but inform it, and for future design. So when we talk about the future and ownership debate, it usually falls into these three buckets: public, private, and then the hybrid. Public systems give us stability, we perceive, and access, we believe, but often at the cost of speed. And frankly, we'll actually talk about the cost, where public transit is in the tune of $100 million, $240 million a mile, years, if not decades, to plan, and sometimes when it's done, it's actually antiquated. So again, we deal with that slowness. The private side is where companies are going to move faster and innovate, and it's really driven by profit. There's a known, it's the assumption that when we build it, they will use it. And typically private sector is a lot faster at doing that. And then of course that hybrid model where there's a public-private partnership. These are becoming more commonplace because the combination of public oversight with private efficiency is really starting to take hold. And again, that requires a lot of dialogue, a lot of open communication, and a lot of pre-planning in the future of mobility, future of city design. But here's the real tension. Who controls pricing? Who controls the access? And what about the data? Because whoever owns the system is ultimately going to be able to shape that end user experience. So again, this is the beginning of that dialogue and adoption of public and private partnerships when it comes to the future of transportation, mobility, access, and infrastructure. Along the same discourse is really about who owns the system is actually going to impact innovation and scalability. I will absolutely interject here that SNAAP Transportation ecosystem, our mantra is not only redefining the future of sustainable, scalable, and resilient urban mobility, but our emphasis is focusing on a better quality of life for all through mobility, accessibility, job creation, and local ownership. And so we believe that we have not only positioned a mobility system, but also a business model that really should be invited everywhere in the world. So ownership is going to focus around private companies who want to iterate faster and take risks where government far is risk averse. Public systems struggle to even pilot and scale new solutions. That's a given. That's why there's this tendency to stick to the old ways. Fragmentation limits interoperability, the ability to go across regions, to go from Virginia to Maryland to New York, Pennsylvania, versus national top-down governance, certainly in other countries where that is far less prohibition. Innovation happens around public systems, but not within them. Public will create their infrastructure, their transportation systems, and everybody else is moving around, whether it's micromobility, autonomous vehicles, aerial, and so forth. And then finally, scalability is really going to depend on unified systems. We talked in another episode about human behavior and the psychology of mobility. And there is predictability, is that people move towards predictable, least friction or drag on their day, fewer decisions, seamless experiences. Those are the mobility systems of the future that are going to drive adoption. To create another layer of concrete reinforced infrastructure is not what people are looking for. They're not looking necessarily, they will appreciate an electric bus, but they're not looking to be stuck in traffic. And even then, people's desires to be in public and mass transit is increasingly less. Again, against the backdrop of national standards, national culture, local adoption. And so really the ownership is going to be impacting the innovation, the scalability, and while public may continue to build towards group and mass transit, it will certainly be private sector that will come behind that and fill in the gaps. Again, where SNAAP Transportation is focused is creating a flexible, scalable, certainly resilient mobility gap-filling infrastructure where we actually operate 16 feet above ground. Call it a personal monorail, A to B, nonstop, battery power, solar charge. And again, it is a shared system. So it's public-private partnership, but also an immediate return on investment where typically public sector is not returning that unless you filed your taxes. Now, we've talked about the public-private partnerships, but why is local ownership model starting to gain attention? And really focus on a few areas here. Cities want more control over mobility outcomes. They want it pushed down, not just federal and state, but certainly within a local government. Local governments Everything is local. Politics is local. So people want to focus on really that better understanding of we know what our people want. And while that can still be scalable, there is that desire to control a lot more of what's going to happen locally. Then the rise of regional mobility platforms or other smart city initiatives. Wonderful. We're a partner with the Smart Cities Council and groups around the world that are really trying to have smart cities, sustainable cities, scalable solutions, save our environment. And again, that's where SNAAP Transportation has been focused. And then community-based ownership. Again, I just mentioned that in a few moments ago around SNAAP Transportation's business model, which is around local job creation and local ownership, which people kind of dig in and say, really tell us more what that means. And then finally, technology is enabling and decentralized control, and that's an exciting component. So again, one of the most interesting shifts right now is toward this local ownership model. Now I want to highlight one example here for the balance of this time. Whether it's smart cities, sustainable cities, or very specifically commercial and residential developers. Commercial and residential developers in particular are building extraordinary cities of the future. What is a critical piece of their work is to include mobility infrastructure and not just roads, not just BRTs, bus rapid transit, and not public group metro scale transit. There's got to be a serious look at this middle gap of a flexible and scalable personal rapid transit system where people can go point A to point B, where the system is sustainable, it's battery powered and solar charged, that it is reliable, it is relatable, it is, let me say, fun, and it's actually affordable. And the combination of private developers and public access then creates the ability for actually a return on investment. So now you have job creation, you have better quality of life, you have local ownership, you have a return on investment, and that better quality of life for everybody within reach of that. And then again, that can be scaled outside of these principal developing locations. We're going to finish this episode really about the future of ownership and what it could look like. And first of all, we're going to talk about the platform-based ecosystem, mobility as a service. If you look at really SNAAP Transportation, we talk about transportation as a service and then personal rapid transit as that subcategory. So mobility as a service is really the same way of describing it. The data ownership becomes more valuable than just actually the physical infrastructure. Understanding human behavior will actually drive urban development where we better understand people's choices. We've talked about that. And then how commercial residential developers will build, how people are accessing transportation hubs, how people don't go to airports in mass groups. They go in one person and two person. So why are we building mass infrastructure to an airport rather than a personal rapid transit system, the in and out, the last 5 miles? So again, the data and ownership will be extremely important. It's actually important for business, for advertising and journey advertising along these mobility systems. Cooperative and community-owned mobility systems, again, this is that ability to plan into the future, to have public sector and private sector come together, to have particularly residential commercial developers, whether they're building new office space, whether they're building residential locations. These are the opportune times to have smart mobility systems, seamless systems designed in before, rather than have to do the retrofitting after. And again, your capital outlay is far better on the front end than certainly the back end. And really it now starts to shift from owning assets to orchestrating networks where everybody has a piece of the puzzle and actually a piece of the pie. This is where the Middle East, and again, we've talked about this in prior episodes, has been incredibly adept, and their work is exciting around converting oil wealth into a broad portfolio. So again, the future of ownership really is going to be very different. And there's so much innovation. There's so much, again, around smart cities and sustainable cities and commercial residential development and expansive shopping malls and world trade centers and expo cities that invite these public-private partnerships. And really, it's not we own everything, but a shared work going forward in the future of mobility. So again, my name is Andrew Cary. I'm co-founder, CEO of SNAAP Transportation. Thank you for joining us in this episode. If you'd like to talk to us more about being a partner, you're just an individual and like to know more, hey, where's SNAAP Transportation going to be deployed first? Maybe you're an investor or a strategic partner that brings an asset class to the work that we're doing. We invite you. You can send an email to info@ridesnap. Snap is always with 2ways.com. Follow us across platforms. Please, we invite you to follow us, comment, share, like, and we look forward to bringing SNAAP Transportation to the global marketplace.